2024 is over, which means it's now time to figure out what the best films of the year were. I will admit to you that I didn't see every single thing that went into theaters, but I saw a fair bit, including around 25 films at the Toronto International Film Festival. Anyways, let's talk about the best films of 2024. But first, did you know that you can decide what the best films of the year were for the Cinemateq Film Awards? That's right. Link in the description box below. There is the nomination ballot that is available right now. Let me know what you thought were the best, and then we'll put it all together and have a big old awards show. But go do the nomination thing right now. Cool? Great. Now, how about we do some honorable mentions before we get into the top 10 list? Honorable mention number 1, The Wild Robot by Chris Sanders. The best animated film that I saw all year. Honorable mention number 2, By the Stream by Hong Sang-soo. The best slow cinema film that I saw all year, and it contains the best scene of people crying of the year as well. So many accolades. Honorable mention number 3 is Abigail by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette. This was a fun old little horror film that had a lot of personality to it. It was actually very unserious, and it had a bunch of people in it that I enjoyed, a bunch of performers that I really like, and I just had a lot of fun. Gotta love having fun, you know? And then honorable mention number 4, perhaps a bit of a controversial pick, is Nosferatu by Robert Eggers. I know a lot of people are probably putting this film in their top 10. I decided to put in my honorable mentions because there were just some things about it that didn't really sit right with me. It largely had to do with everything that happened after they left Count Orlok's castle. I thought the Count Orlok castle sequence was incredible. It was nightmarish and it was surreal, and I kind of wish that the entire film was like that. And then as soon as I got back to Germany, I can't exactly explain why, but the film just no longer engaged me at that point. I likely need to watch it again in order to pinpoint exactly what it is that's bothering me, although I think it may have something to do with the subjectivity of the surrealist imagery from that point forward after they get back from the castle. But more on that maybe later. Subscribe! Top 10 time, and we are starting off with number 10, Challengers by Luca Guadagnino. This film I love a lot for various different reasons. First of all, I kind of like tennis. You didn't know that about me. Second of all, performances overall very good. Zendaya in her best role, I think, so far, but also I would feel kind of weird if she ever got a nomination for it. Really good performance, but I don't think one of the best of the year, as a lot of people were saying when this film came out. Also, for score, you've got Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. They just won a Golden Globe for this film, so that's great for them. And then really just Guadagnino, the way that he goes about making his films, loved it. Loved the way that this was put together. There was tension, there was sexual tension, lots of little bits of tension. If there's anything that I could say against this film, it would be that in some moments the film felt very artificial. Not so much in a performance standpoint. I felt that the performers all did a very good job in this film, but some scenes you could just tell that it was a set. You could just tell that it was a not very good set. And those little moments bothered me a little bit. Not to the point, though, where I would put it out of the top 10, but those moments were there. Still, really good movie. Film number 9 on the list is A Different Man by Aaron Schimberg. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And this was a film I was interested in because it had Sebastian Stan in it, and he's been doing interesting things in the indie scene. But then I also found out that Renate Reinsve is in it, and I knew I had to see it. For those of you who don't remember, she was the lead in Worst Person in the World, and we love her around here. I was very excited to see her in this, and I think it was one of her first, if not the first, English language performances she had ever done, so I was really interested to check that out. First scene, I was a little worried for her, but then she knocked it out of the park. She did a great job. Aside from Renate, there's a lot of things in this film to love. I love the look of it, I love the feel of it, but really what got me was this sort of surface level reading of it. We're not going to get too deep into the thematics, but the idea that you need to fix what's inside before fixing what's outside will help you is an interesting concept to tackle in this day and age when people are getting plastic surgery, Botox, tattoos, which I have, and a lot of other things, changing their bodies as they wish. And I know in some cases, especially if you're on Instagram, you'll see people talking about, oh, hey, my mental health is declining. I better go get another tattoo. And this film kind of speaks to that sort of mentality. If you're incapable of fixing what's inside, fixing what's outside isn't going to do anything for you. And the idea that it will, this hope that somehow you can be fixed or repaired based on changing the surface level parts of your body without paying any attention to what's going on inside in your head, it's probably a message and an exploration that we need to see a little bit more often, because I think not a lot of people saw this film, which is too bad because they probably should have. Film number 8 is The Brutalist by Brady Corbett, and this one is mostly on the list due to the degree of difficulty. It was massive on this film. I was at a Q&A screening of this film where Brady talked about the film afterwards, and he was asked the question, well, how much did it cost and how long did you have to shoot it? Because when you see it, you're thinking to yourself, oh, this film, as a mid-budget film, probably cost $40-50 million. Maybe they shot it in like 50 days. Brady told us that it cost $10 million to make, and they shot it in a little over 30 days, which is, and I'm not kidding, ridiculous. Considering the scope and the scale of this film, the fact that it's like a 3-hour long epic that takes place from like the, I think, late 1940s all the way into the 1960s in America, the fact that you just see people grow and change over the course of decades, the fact that they were able to pull this off for $10 million while shooting most, if not all of the film on 70 millimeter, that's nuts. That's insane. And then beyond that, the dang film is good too. It's a wonderful little missive on the idea of power and the relationships that people have, how people can wield power over those who are not able to really defend themselves. An actually interesting parallel to this film is the current conversation we're seeing in the United States about H-1B1 visas and how certain corporations are essentially using immigrant labor at a cheaper cost than what they would be paying for American labor, and how they can control these people's lives, because if they lose their visa, if they get fired, then they get deported immediately. It's an interesting parallel to what Brady is doing here, although not one that I think he necessarily meant. It's just one of those fun ways in how film and art can reflect the reality that we are experiencing, even accidentally. Beyond that, though, all of the normal qualifiers to pretty much everything that I'm going to say about every film in this list apply. Looks great, sounds great, acting is incredible. Can't go wrong watching this film unless you need to be somewhere in like half an hour, because you are not going to be able to get through this one quickly. Film number 7 on the list is Kill the Jockey by director Luis Ortega. And I will tell you that as soon as I finished watching this film, I think my Letterboxd review was something like, I must now immediately go see other Luis Ortega films. I was immediately struck by his unique approach to aesthetic, although maybe saying that it's unique is a little bit of a disservice. I think maybe the best way to describe it is that it's Wes Anderson-esque, but it's not so preoccupied with using kind of overblown, very colorful palettes in the production design, in the painting, in the parts of the film that are completely made up. I guess maybe that's the difference. A Luis Ortega film feels like a Wes Anderson film that could happen in real life. It feels very structured. It feels very well planned, very thought out. There's no sense of aesthetic chaos in Kill the Jockey. It all feels very on purpose. And I know that most films are on purpose. They kind of have to be because of the way that they're shot. But this film felt especially on purpose. I also own a certain debt of gratitude to this film because I did see it at the Toronto International Film Festival this year. And up until the point when I saw this, I think a lot of the stuff that I saw wasn't that great. It wasn't a great year for TIFF. And this was, I think, the first film where I thought to myself, you know what? I'm still cool with being here. I still like this place. I think if there was any justice in this world, then Kill the Jockey would have made it onto the short or long list for the Oscars for Best International Film. I don't believe that it did, which is a shame because it certainly is better than some other films on that list, like Emilia Perez, for example. Yeah, that's right. Emilia Perez is going to catch strays today. Film number 6 on the list is the best pure horror film on the entire list, and that is Oddity, directed by Damien McCarthy. This film absolutely took me by surprise. I didn't really know much about it at all. A friend of mine was like, hey, let's go see it. And I was like, all right, let's go check out this horror movie. And I was kind of blown away by what I saw. The calling card of any good horror movie is, does it scare you? Does it make you feel fear? And Oddity, to its credit, absolutely did. But I was most impressed with how this film built that fear through the different applications of formal techniques like framing and focal depth. The first scene of the film, you have a woman essentially talking through a door, a little slat kind of thing in her door. And on the other side of that door is a person. You really only see that person's like eyes and a little bit of their face because you're only ever looking at them through that opening. And the tension here is that this person outside is trying to convince the person inside that someone else got into the house when she wasn't looking, the person inside. And then now that person is potentially in danger. And she's trying to figure out, should I believe this person and let them in so they can help me? Or are they just trying to get in, and are they lying to me because they want to do bad shit to me? And the framing in this section is incredible because all we ever really see is a small part of the space that the woman is occupying. There's lots of space that we are not seeing, and we're only ever seeing like little bits and pieces of the person who's outside. And so it becomes difficult for us to make an assessment on the person who's outside. And for all we know, if someone did run into the house and the woman is in danger, that killer could be right behind her and we wouldn't know it as a viewer. And so we're kind of just waiting for either the film to begin with this woman being killed or with the door opening. There are multiple layers of tension and fear here, and it's only the first scene. And the film just keeps going like that. It's one of the best examples of fear, terror, unease being elicited from me as a viewer simply by where people are positioned in frame and how they are shown in frame. It's honestly incredible stuff, and it's the kind of film that every young director should watch because you don't need to like stab someone in the stomach and have lots of blood going everywhere in order to create fear, right? As a payoff. There is much different ways that you can go about it, especially if you are skilled in the fundamentals of how to make a film. Like, great stuff, wonderful stuff. Number 5 on the list is perhaps going to be a controversial one. I'm putting Civil War by Alex Garland right here. And much as I just said about Oddity in that it was a film that made me feel fear, Civil War was a film, especially at the end, that got my adrenaline pumping. This film got me engaged, especially at the end in that one sequence, which I won't spoil much for those of you who haven't seen it. The reason I say this is a controversial pick is that I think a lot of people got it in their heads that this film would live or die based on how it represented their own political viewpoints on the world. I think a lot of people went into it hoping for an absolute castration of right-wing politics and Donald Trump in particular. And in their minds, they didn't exactly get that. I am of the view that the film actually does go after like extreme right-wing politics and MAGA people like pretty hard, but I guess it's just not as explicit as some people were hoping for. This is also a film about journalism and the role that journalists play in a war zone. Can they be affected by the horrendous images that they see every day and capture and send back home? And for my money, this is a beautiful film. There's only one scene in the entire film that I still think back on and say, what the hell were they thinking there? For those of you who have seen the film, it's like the mini putt scene. That just looks so egregiously dumb. But even in the context of the film, I can kind of give it a pass because I understand like why it was there. This is another film where I feel like the degree of difficulty was actually quite high. And the fact that they were able to do it with a relatively small budget, like not Brutalist small, but still small, and the result that Alex Garland was able to get out of it, like, I think that every single Marvel film should feel ashamed. Honestly, I do. This film and The Brutalist and some of the other films on this list, Marvel films, DC films, the big studio films, the Fast and the Furious, they should be watching films like this and feeling absolute shame. Because for 10 times the amount of money, they are just making worse films. And it's kind of sad at this point. Beyond that, though, I think Civil War is certainly one to watch. It's an interesting thought experiment when it comes to how America would react to the Civil War. I think if you actually engage with what's going on in terms of how the forces are built up, how the different states are aligned and things like that, you start to think to yourself, all right, maybe Alex Garland was doing this or doing that. Don't just dismiss it outright. I think you're actually doing yourself a disservice if you were to do that. And frankly, this pick does just come down to how this film made me feel at the end. I was high when I left Civil War. I was high for a couple of hours, mostly because of that last half-hour-ish sequence at the end. I was enthralled. And I'm the jaded type of cinephile who's seen so much that I need to pay attention when I physically react to a film. And it's a film that I actually can't wait to revisit. Gotta wait for that 4K to come on rental, and then it's mine. Speaking of a film I desperately want to revisit, it's film number 4 on this list, The Substance, directed by Coraline Farget? Farget? I'm not sure on that one. Apologies once again. This is just like one of the best theater going experiences I had all year. It is obviously a body horror film for those of you who haven't seen it. There are a couple of bodies and they're all horrific in their own way. It has a strong, bold aesthetic sensibility. I just always think back of the hallways that she walks through. Those just always stick out in my mind. Think about any film in your life when you can just think to yourself, man, remember that hallway? Even the hallways were important in this movie. That's kind of crazy. And yes, it has to be said that the performances as well were top notch. Who knew that Dennis Quaid could even do those kinds of things? You got Demi Moore, you got Margot Qualley, you've got Dennis Quaid. And honestly, Dennis Quaid may have been the biggest surprise in this. Like, I know that Demi Moore and Margot Qualley can act, but Dennis Quaid was just doing a character that I had never seen from him before, and it had a kind of energy that I had never seen from him before. I was honestly surprised he was even in this. I thought he had been kind of relegated to right-wing Reagan movies and stuff like that. But hey, here he is in The Substance, so that's kind of cool. And then I can't talk about The Substance without talking about the end of it a little bit. I'll try to keep it light on spoilers. But for those of you who don't know, the basic premise of this film is that Demi Moore is an aging actress and she wants to feel young again, and she finds the substance that allows her to do that. 7 days at a time, she turns into Margot Qualley, who then goes off and is a young, vivacious actress who ends up doing a lot of the same stuff that Demi Moore was doing in her career, which was a little strange. I know for everyone who watched us, we were all like, man, fitness videos are just not this in demand anymore. But you know what? We're here for the ride and we're all about it. And of course, The Substance works in a way where if you don't follow the rules, bad things happen to you. And all of the bad things kind of culminate at the very end when Demi Moore tries to have fun on New Year's Eve. Once again, I'm not going to get into spoilers for it, but I have a feeling that if GWAR ever saw the end of this movie, they would be very proud. They would feel like proud parents, I think. Every single member of GWAR. Once again, the best overall experience I had in a theater with a crowd. Absolutely try to see it that way if you can. I don't know if it's in theaters, but if not, I think it's on Mubi, so go watch it on Mubi. Not sponsored. Film number 3 is The Girl with the Needle, directed by Magnus von Horn, another film from Mubi, actually. That's kind of interesting. This is probably my pick for best cinematography and production design for the whole year. The aesthetics are very sharp and they're matched with detailed black and white cinematography. You're not going to see a film look like this for a while. It was almost like we were watching, from an aesthetic standpoint, a film from the late 20s, but with the technology of today. And in fact, there are some moments early in the film where we're seeing some kind of surreal imagery, some terrifying imagery. And the way that these horrific images are constructed, it reminded me a lot of early special effects works from the silent era. And it really set the mood. And the mood was not good. But the film is great. I want to be clear on that. It's a disturbing film. It's a gut-wrenching film. It even flirts with body horror on occasion. And I don't mean in the David Cronenberg kind of way where your skin starts getting all goopy and stuff. I'm talking about how in this film there are people who do horrific things to bodies. And people have had horrific things happen to their bodies. Like, I'm not kidding. When I say this film is gut-wrenching, I am telling you, I am advising you that if you get queasy from seeing things that are like quease-inducing, you probably might want to skip this one, or at least be prepared to close your eyes at a couple of moments. And I need to finish this off by saying this entire film is anchored by an incredible performance by Victoria Carmen Sun, who I don't think I'd seen in a film before, maybe in like a bit part or something like that, but she's one to watch. She acted her goddamn face off. Honestly, one of the best performances of the year. Like, just incredible, incredible stuff. And now we're at the final two films on this list. And no, there isn't a tie going on here, but I do feel the need to talk about both of these films at once. It's Anora and it's Dune Part 2. Anora directed by Sean Baker and Dune Part 2 directed by, of course, Denis Villeneuve. And the reason why I'm talking about both of these films at the same time is that they are the only two films that came out in 2024 that I gave a 5-star review to. I saw Anora once at the North American premiere at TIFF, and that was an incredible theater-going experience as well. Not quite as good as The Substance, but still a great theater-going experience. It's the Cannes Palme d'Or winner. If there's any justice in this world, Mikey Madison will win Best Actress at the Oscars, although I don't think she's going to now. I feel like maybe Demi Moore is coming for it. And her performance is very integral to this film, not just because she's the lead, but it's her performance that dictates the feeling and the pace of the film at every single turn. The film matches her energy exactly. So at times she's living in a kind of dreamlike fantasy, and the film reflects that. The film then moves into a very chaotic moment, and that is a reflection of her. And then as the film slowly becomes more and more tragic, that once again is coming from her. This film is Mikey Madison at every turn. It's a remarkable performance. And speaking of performances, I just want to give a quick shout out to Yuria Borisov, who you may or may not remember from the film Compartment Number 6, a criminally underseen film from a couple of years ago. I hope that people go and search it out now just to see other things that he has done. Great in that film, great in this film. Once again, if there was any justice in this world, he would win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, but I don't think it's going to go that way, unfortunately. But maybe he gets nominated. That'd be pretty cool. As I mentioned, the other film that made it into this top 2 was Dune Part 2. And, of course it did. I saw this film, I think 3 times in theaters. I gave it a 4.5 star and then 2 5 stars after that. I have since seen it a 4th time because I now own it on 4K Blu-ray. And it's a remarkable cinematic achievement. It's kind of on the almost other end of The Brutalist, in that The Brutalist shows you what you can do with $10 million. Dune Part 2 shows you what you can do with $200 million. And once again, every other big blockbuster should feel ashamed of itself, knowing that it must now exist in a world with Dune Part 2. It's insane. It's actually insane that we live in a world where it seems acceptable, where people can just throw out things like Fast X and like Captain Marvel and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on them, and then Denis Villeneuve can just show up with like a literal blueprint, a plan, a finished script, and completely and utterly embarrass the rest of the film industry. He embarrassed the film industry with this film. It's incredible to see. Beyond just that, though, the usual things that I would say about a great film are true of this film. Cinematography, top notch. Performances, pretty dang good. I still love that moment when Timothée Chalamet goes all like insane and starts yelling at people. Like, that still gets my spine a-tingling. And that's hard to do. My spine is usually a no-tingle zone. So then who actually gets top spot between Dune Part 2 and Anora? And while this is a hard decision, it's actually a very easy one. As I mentioned, I have seen Dune Part 2 4 times at this point. I have only seen Anora once. I think Anora is an incredible film, but it's not a film where I thought to myself, I need to go back and rewatch it again. With Dune Part 2, though, after I saw it the first time, I went to see it the next weekend, and then I went to see it the next weekend again. I saw Dune Part 2 3 times in like a 15-day period, and then I got the 4K as soon as I could afford it. So, yeah, best film of the year, number 1 film of the year. It's Dune Part 2 by Denis Villeneuve. And what I want to know now is, what is your favorite film of the year? Give me a list. In fact, tell me what the list is by voting in the Cinemateq Film Awards nomination ballot thing below in the description. See, I mentioned it again. I'm very good at this. And hey, like the video if you think this is a good list, or you just think I'm kind of a cool guy. Whatever works for you.